So to install this fuel pump, the first thing that I always do when messing with a fuel system is depressurize a fuel system. So this is the easiest way, most foolproof way that I have found in order to do that. So removing your rear seat, to gain access to your connector for your fuel pump. Remove your clips. They just pull out. So to remove these clips, easiest thing that I've found to do, push down right in the center, push down, then you pull out. After removing all four, you just pull up from the center. It kind of sometimes has to be hard. So you do that over on this side, over on that side, and then you push the seat back, lift it up, and then pull it out. So after you get the seat out, you'll see this cover here, you'll want to take a Phillips bit and your drill and take out these 3 screws. So you'll take these 3 screws out. Make sure you don't lose them. And then you'll get access to your fuel pump here. So this is for your level sender, and this is for your fuel pump. It's the 3 poles and a ground coming out of your brushless controller, which for an S4 lives here, an A6, S6 lives down here. So push down, pull this clip back, and then this pops out. So this will remove any kind of power to your fuel pump. What you're going to do is you're going to get in the car, you're going to start it and let it idle until you start hearing it idle rough. If you start hearing it idle rough, you know most of the pressure is out of this fuel line. And you'll still want regs, but it'll release all the burst of pressure that you can possibly get when removing this fuel line. If your fuel tank is above half, if it's anything really above 3/8 of a tank, you're gonna get splashed with fuel when you open up the fuel tank, and it's just real annoying digging around in a fuel tank, you know, halfway up, with fuel halfway up your forearms. So as you see here, you know, my fuel tank's basically full. So there's a way that you can make this easier on yourself with VCDS by draining your fuel tank. So I'm going to go into the engine bay before you do this, but to actually drain it. But to get to that function, you can select your engine module, your basic settings. You go down to draining fuel tank. So with your connector connected back there, because or else your fuel pump's not going to get power, you hit draining fuel tank, hit go, and you'll hear it run. So when you have it sufficiently low, or you hear it, you hear the fuel pump cavitating, it's probably best bet to stick like a 5-gallon bucket next to you to watch it, or have someone watch it up front. While you're doing this, bring your laptop up front, but I'll show you what I mean by that in the engine bay. So before you do that draining fuel function, you can disconnect your fuel lines here, here. You can even disconnect it over here, as long as you have a line to extend it into like a 5-gallon bucket, another fuel fuel tank or something to catch the fuel. You can bring your laptop up here, and you can do that if your cable will reach. And then you can drain your fuel until you start hearing it cavitate, and then you know you're not going to be swimming in fuel while you're changing the fuel pump. So you'll start your car up. You'll get an EPC light because it's unplugged. Those codes you'll clear after you install everything again. So you'll idle for a little bit. It takes a little while because there's a lot of fuel in the lines. The high pressure, there you go. Now it turns off. Now we go back to the rear seats. After you have relieved all of the pressure in your fuel line, what you're going to want to get is a bunch of rags, fire extinguisher, because you got fuel that's going to be flowing, a little bit of fuel that's going to spill, safety glasses, and gloves if you need them. So what you're going to do here is remove your fuel level sender connector, your other connector here, pull these all out of the way so none of that gets doused with fuel. You want to grab a bunch of these rags, stuff them back here, because this is where the fuel goes. This is where it tends to congregate. Stuff a bunch of this here, grab a bunch of extra to cover your fuel line. Let's see if I can't get this. So there is your clip right here that you push in, and you push this in, push the connector down. What you have is instead of this button right here, there's a button on the side, on both sides here. So what you're going to want to do with that, because people tend to break them, is it's imperative that you push down first. And what that'll do is that'll keep your clips from breaking. So you push down first, press the two side clips, press them in, and hear a click, and then you pull it up after that. If you don't have the hand strength to push those two clips in, or the technique, it's kind of tricky, you can use hose pliers. So it is imperative, though, that's where people break these and they force them. It's imperative that before you squeeze them, those two clips on either side, because I only got one hand here, but the imperative that you push the connector down first. If you don't do that, you're just going to be binding everything up, and you're going to break that. And then, unless you replace this section of this fuel line, or you can get a connector or get a fuel line connector in here, you're making yourself a fuel line. You're going to break it. And then slowly pull it up. You'll hear a little bit of that fuel that's still pressurized in there guzzling out, and that's why you grab your rag. And as you lift this up slowly, use the rag to keep from spraying all over you, all over your interior. If you really want, you can cover all your carpeting with rags and then just have a bunch extra. And then if you want to use another bucket or another drain pan, keep that in here so you can throw all the rags in there. So, because they're gonna possibly be pretty soaked. So let me see if I can do this with one hand. Okay, let's pass it. Here it's fizzing, bubbling out of there. Just want to catch as much of that as you can. So it's just keeping it as clean and as fuel free. Trying to keep all that stuff contained in the rags. Car won't stink as bad. Pull these rags out, change them. Just throw these on the ground here. If you would have done that without relieving any of the pressure, that just would have geysered everywhere. So, and then what I like to do is, because this will wick fuel, is I just like to get as dry of a rag as possible. Put that over that. You can just stuff it up out of the way. So you'll see here, least amount of fuel possible spilled. Take your time. It's not super dirty. You don't get fuel everywhere. Then I'm going to go grab the tool for this ring that I prefer. After you depressurized your fuel system, removed your fuel line, make sure all your wiring's out of the way. There's these tabs down here that you want to use a screwdriver to push out of the way. There's another one right here. So they do not bind up on these teeth. Or else it just makes it harder for you to remove this lock ring. Put your tool on there, make sure it engages. With 3 of the teeth, and then loosen your lock ring with your ratchet. Proceed to pull your fuel pump out, disconnect the wiring inside, and if you have a B8, disconnecting the corrugated tube that's attached to it. This is what you'll be seeing inside a S6, A6, S4, B8.5 tank. The B8 tank will have, I believe it's a saddle tank, so you'll have another corrugated tube that goes to the back of the pump. When you install this in a B8 car, you just want to route that corrugated tube out of the way of the fuel float. If you want to bend it back, on itself and zip tie it, you can do that. It just needs to be out of the way of the float level. So you see here, this is your second fuel level wiring. So that's your fuel level over there. Your second one. It travels all the way through the tank, and that's what you get right here. So this will have to be disconnected in the other cars except for the B8. This is the only thing that you'll have to disconnect from the fuel pump in order to get the fuel pump out of there. So you disconnect this out of the bottom of the lid, and you can pull your other fuel pump out, and then you stick it in your drain pan, because it'll pretty much have the whole basket full of fuel. So with this removed, you can remove these 2 bolts and then pull your controller out, and that'll make it the easiest to connect your wiring for your PWM and your 12-volt ignition that you need, as well as attaching your B8 conversion harness. So if you're a B8, this is approximately where your brush fuel controller lives as well. A6, S6 are down here. You'll have to lower the fuel tank slightly to be able to get access through here, as it's set further back, deeper underneath your car. So I've removed the 2 bolts here. And as you see, the controller doesn't like to come out straight like this. You'll have to snake it around, rotate it around to be able to get enough room to pull this out. So once you have your controller out, I always like disconnecting these type of connectors with a pick. You get in here and you pop this out, pop it up so you do not break your clip. So now we're in the back of the trunk, and I've got a few things removed because I never reinstalled them. But what you're going to want to do is remove your tie downs, and then for both the A6 and S4, you got 2 rivets that I have not yet installed back in the car, but you're going to remove those with some trim pliers. Pop those out, and then pop your carpet out of the tabs back there and pull the whole carpet out. That right there is going to be covered on your car. I just haven't put my panel back for the 2nd level sensor. There's normally a plastic trim piece that goes along back here. The A6, I believe, S6 doesn't have to be removed. But for the S4, S5, it definitely does, in order to get your wiring routed up behind this panel. So you're going to want to remove everything in the back of this trunk to get to your positive and negative. Once you remove everything, your tire, your tools, you're going to expose your positive and chassis ground. So you're going to put your positive right here. You're going to remove that bolt, put your ring terminal there, and then you got a chassis ground. You're going to remove that nut and put your chassis ground there. In order to install your harness, you're going to have to get into the passenger rear part of the trunk. This is an S4, same with an S5. If you want a visual reference for an A6, S6, go and watch Wrenchin's video. So, similar location, just getting there is a little bit different. So specifically on an S4, you're going to pull this compartment out to the side. And what you're going to see here is where your wiring harness, most of your wiring harness is going to live. So you'll have your relay and your secondary brushless fuel pump controller living back here. What I recommend to do with this applied screw is mount your fused relay up somewhere out of the way, and then your positive and negative goes in between your panel, and comes out in this location. There's a similar location for the A6, S6, but it has a channel there that wrenching goes over. And then your ground cable goes down here. You use a 13mm to pull that up. The A6, S6 is in that location, kind of where the ring terminal for the positive is just laying right now. And then you can route your battery positive around here and connect to, remove that 13mm and connect there for your battery positive. You see, those are now installed. Can be zip tied to be a little cleaner. To keep these wires out of the way. They're not rubbing against your tire or any of your tool holder back here. But this is the gist of that. So with the A6 has a similar channel as the S4, and I'm going to route it up and along there, and that you can also use some zip ties to secure it up along this wiring loom. Before running any more of that wiring harness, so you can push it all the way into the rear seat area. Remove this T30, and this whole side bolster will come out, and then bring the seat forward, and it'll be really easy to see where that wiring harness pops out, and you'll be able to fish it through, fish the second pump harness through. Remove that side bolster. You just remove that screw and it just slides right out, or straight out. So push this over to the side, and you can see where that wiring harness comes through. And that's your compartment in the trunk where your wiring harness is going to shoot through. This is all fabric taped right here. That you can either cut that and wrap more of it, or I'm just going to end up zip tying right over the top of that. Here's a shot of the harness being ran from the back. A couple zip ties. I'll go to the front. That's where the harness comes around. Another zip tie underneath the seatbelt. And then makes its way over to your fuel pump. I recommend not cutting any zip ties on that harness until you can make sure that harness will reach your fuel pump, and it'll reach your controller as well. So I did that, put that side bolster back in, put the seat back up, and there's a little rubber grommet that goes right here. So I unwrapped all the tape that's around your OEM harness, and then you can either throw this out, or what I did, I cut it along the side. You can do that. You can route your second pump harness along your first pump harness, your first pump harness gets connected to where you get your PWM and ignition, and this goes into your controller. You connect this jumper to your fuel pump controller, line up these holes, line up the holes on the fuel pump controller, tighten this up, and then tighten down your lock ring on your fuel pump. After that, we'll be able to connect all the rest of this stuff. If you have a dual fuel pump, this is what your wiring will look like for your B8 car. You'll first plug in the wiring harness for your second pump, and then you'll plug in your conversion harness into that. This is approximately what your wiring is going to look like if you have a dual pump and a B8 car. I shoved more of this wiring for the adapter under the car. You want to make sure that this packages nicely so your fuel line can get to the lid, and you'll just have a little bit less real estate under or on top of your fuel lid than if you have a single pump. So you have your dual pump that's ready to be installed. Now that you pulled your fuel pump out, I like to get this out of the way, kind of push it towards the back so it doesn't get snagged on anything when you set your pump down in there. So you're going to grab this thing and you're going to put the level in first, and then the basket in. And the single pumps, you'll have a tether, and you'll have enough room to get the lid out of the way. But because of this return, it's too low to get it out of the way of your fuel tank, and then you'll have the underside of your car have a little sheet metal. The sheet metal on the underside of your car will keep your dual fuel pump from going in, so I don't supply it with a tether. So you stick everything in there after you get your fuel level, float, and your basket in, and all of that goes in there. Now you grab your second level sensor, and I route it away from your fuel level. Your fuel level float goes towards the front of the car, so I route it around the back of the pump and stick it into the lid. So you stick it into the lid right here, and then there's a little tab that goes onto these guide rods, or you can take this and route it in between the guide rods and the fuel filter, and that'll also keep it out of the way. So once you get that installed, these two bigger holes that you see right there are what your guide rods sit in. So the one with the spring goes in the bigger hole, the smaller guide rod goes in the smaller hole. So there you go. Everything's routed real clean. You'll see the float right there. It's got no obstructions, so all this can go back together. So the lid on your fuel pump will have a locating tab that fits in your gas tank, and that'll sit down like that. And you'll put your lock ring back on, and what you're going to want to do is get your lock ring started. Making sure it sits in that tab. If it's not sitting in that tab, then it will not seat around the O-ring that's underneath your lid, and you're going to get leakage the first time you fill up, and it's going to pour out underneath your car, underneath your exhaust, and it's not going to be a good day at the pumps. So you get that as tight as you can by hand. And what you're going to want to do is tighten your lock ring down. My rule of thumb for this is loosen with a long ratchet and tighten with a short one. So I just tighten it until it's snug, and then just snug it up slightly a little bit more. It should just be good and tight. After running all your wires and connecting your fuel line, this is approximately how it should look. For that jumper, for your PWM and ignition, I shove that back underneath the car. And then if you're reusing this, you're going to want to rewrap this with fabric tape. Make sure nothing's too tight here. When you put your seat down, you don't want it to be snagging and pulling on anything. And then you can just reassemble your cap here, that little metal lid, and put your seat back in.